These headquarters at Gettysburg and Seminary Ridge. Let's go check out the building. See this building I'm talking about? Remember that?
Yeah, no, I think I do. Okay.
Because it's at this part right there. There's
Yeah.
the base of it.
Man,
I remember driving that through when we come through
why'd they tear it down?
to make it look original.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah, like right there's the base. Right there it is too. So when did they never tore that down? I think we have some reenactments here in town. Can you look in the window? This window? Yeah. You can. A little. If you look at the sign here in the window, you see then and now pictures.
Oh, okay. Yeah, wow.
It was a Thompson home. Every Friday from June 2nd to August 25th are the weekend days. If they're open, I guess you can go in. See?
Next time is Saturday, June 10th.
Wow.
Yep. You can go in. Charge them over that.
Yeah.
We could take a picture of it.
Yeah.
We could look it up online too. www.battlefield.org.
I'd like to go in sometime.
Yeah.
Kathy's related to General Lee.
Huh?
Kathy, she's related to General Lee
Oh.
through her mom's side.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Let's move along. Here's a garden. Wow. Could be a garden. What shall we plant today? In memory of Robert Glass from New Jersey, dedicated to 2017. hot out here.
It is. Wow.
Should have wore shorts.
Cut down a little finger.
Yeah.
It's like he's probably telling us stuff
Yeah.
down there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that would get rid of the boat.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's many yet.
Hi. Yeah.
Camp out.
Huh?
We didn't camp out here.
I don't know. You're not supposed to camp out.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go see what they're doing down here.
He does the same thing, and now we're ready for 3 and 4 to do their job.
Okay.
So it's kind of confusing when you see it all happening at once.
Yeah.
It's easier to take it and explain because, you know, the number 4 with the lanyard has the easiest job because all he has to do is step in, attach it, step back, and wait for the command to fire as he just pulls it. So
I'm the one actually has a lot of them.
number 3 does more of the physical work because he's got a thumb event. And he's got to keep his elbow up because if when he's doing that, you know,
That's what I'm standing
the
on.
gunner's going to sight it.
His arm.
Yeah, if his arm is cocked down, you can't see the sight.
Yeah.
So he's got to stand with his arm up.
Yeah.
So basically,
So
that barrel, remember, is hot
once the
also.
round is seated,
Right.
once the round is seated,
That's right.
and you got to remember there's a lot of confusion and noise going on this time.
Yeah.
So once the round is seated, number 1 steps back. I'm over here. Once he knows the round is loaded, he could step away from here and go back and get the trail of the gun.
Okay.
So at that point, it's all about aiming. So once the gun is aimed,
He's already
ready
got it
is
up
done, gunner steps away, number 4 comes up, and then he hooks up the lanyard. Now, one of the things that you don't normally kind of think, you look at it and kind of don't really question it so much, but there's a reason why when he hooks the lanyard up, go ahead guys, hook it up like it's going to fire. Okay, so he'll vent, prick the powder charge, he loads the primer, he steps away. Now, you notice he's holding on to it so that he doesn't pull it prematurely.
Yeah.
Okay? So now notice also, he steps away. Everybody gets away from the axles of the gun because when this thing recoils,
It's coming back.
it's going to come back. It'll come back 6 to 8 feet with a round in it. Okay? Because you notice there's no recoil system. Now number 4, he's got the lanyard caught. Now notice he's also looking away. He's looking away, but number 1 and number 2 are watching the muzzle of the gun to make sure it goes off. And when the command fire is given, fire, notice he looked away, and you see how the hook came back?
Oh, so it doesn't
Don't
catch
hit him in the
Yeah,
face.
because you don't want to get hooked in the eye with it, and that's another reason why the gunner would stand back here where I'm at when that happens, because he's got to be able to see everything that's going on. And when he pulls that lanyard, it's going behind him because he's looking away from it.
Yeah.
He's pulling behind his back.
And as
That's
soon
why
as that happens,
you
they
wouldn't-
may say heat battery. If they do, we have to heat this gun back in position.
Yeah, that's a whole nother command to thing. But when you pull the lanyard, some people will stand and face this way. That's not correct by the regulation. You'd be standing like this.
That makes more
And you
sense.
look away.
Pull. You pull behind your back.
What's the average weight?
Oh, that's who? That's
Two?
12.
No, the whole. What are the
The whole
horses
gun is
having to
about
pull?
a ton.
Yeah.
That's what the
2,000
horses
pounds.
are having to pull
2,000.
through woods
Well, it's not
over
only
a
that.
house.
If-
You have a limber chest that has what, like 40 rounds in it.
Well, it has all the supplies and
Right.
primers and ammunition.
All that's pulled with 6
And
horses.
you also have a case on
Okay,
it.
6 horses it takes.
Well, it takes 6 horses to move the gun in the limber. Then you got a case on it, and that has more ammunition and tools inside it. That has 6 horses.
What does it look like?
The case on looks exactly like a limber chest,
You can never know.
but it just follows separately, and it has
Yes.
a second set of wheels on it, and it has a wheel on the back of the other.
Last
So
one.
to go backwards to the
Remember
start,
Christian's battery?
lots of trees.
You'll see
Yeah.
the case on.
You'll see a battery gun
Behind
sitting
it,
on the
you'll
back
see the
end.
limber chest in
There's
front.
limbers and
Okay.
caissons behind it as
Now
well.
remember, the limber chest is
So
facing
you
the
can
wrong
see
way.
that there.
Because what happens is they come in
But
and they
when you get to all the parts of the gun,
bring the horses up in the horses.
everything comes apart in order to transport. This is called a hand trail spike. Now, this carriage is kind of like a lawn ornament. It's not the perfect scale. The hardware doesn't fit like it does by regulation, but it's a representation. So the hand trail spike, everything, all the tools you see here go with the gun when it goes into transport. Like this will be taken out to transport, and it goes in here and out here, like that. So this is a prolong. It's called a prolong, and this is a rope that was used to pull the gun off the field. Like if you can't get to your horses, you got to remove the gun. You can retreat by prolong. You take the end of this rope here. There's a fitting here that you go through the end of the trail down there where that bolt is.
Ah,
And the rest of this rope, you stretch that this way, people can get on the rope and help pull it off by
how
hand.
many men it would take to...
Well, it's surprising you can move this gun with 4 or 5 people
Because of the big wheels.
because of the big wheels.
Yeah.
And that's the part. The problem is, even though you can move it with 4 or 5 people, you know, it's going to be one of those things where you're not going to move it very far.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So if you have 20, 25 guys and you're passing infantry, they can help you out to move it.
If you can get
Also,
them to
if
do
your
it.
horses have been shot down, you got to move it by prolong.
There has been times when they actually took infantry to fire these things. You'd only have a couple men left, and you actually draft infantry, which had no idea how to fire a gun.
Well, they know how to fire it, but
Well,
the
not
thing
that
is
great.
they don't know the drill.
Well,
So
that's
they're not
right.
going to be as fast, and they're not going to be as accurate.
And they're not going to be as safe.
Some might get in, that's what I was thinking, somebody might get, wow, thank you guys.
So you couldn't block the wheels before you shoot?
There's
You wanted to recoil like
It's going to
that?
have to recoil.
You have to let it move, because otherwise, you don't have a recoil system like you do on a modern
I've
artillery.
seen that in modern artillery.
Something's
So,
gonna give
I've
then.
seen
Something
it
has to move, because
Yeah.
this is all rigid. You
Got it.
wouldn't want to block anything.
I see. Yep.
That gun has to move or it'll tear that trunnion.
That makes sense. Okay. Wow.
I'm still amazed at how far that is. I
That-
would have thought
There's
from
video-
distance, I was looking at that field thinking, oh, that's
If
so
you really,
big.
if you really want to see
Chivalry.
what a gun can do, there's some videos on YouTube you can look up. You look up Civil War artillery firing. There's videos of them shooting cannons at things.
Looks like we've got enough folks here to give them a run
Launching the solid shot at the thing from over a mile away.
He gave this group
It's
a
just tearing at the pieces. The sound of the gun, this is another thing that's interesting. This gun is made of bronze. It's not made of brass. There's no such thing as a brass cannon. It's all bronze. Okay? When this gun goes off, a round goes out of a bronze gun, it rings like a bell. Which is like it's a very unique sound.
Folks, come on
Don't get that out of
closer.
cast iron gun.
Do a little preliminary
Out of
here.
a bronze gun,
We'll go through
it
a
makes a really neat
little
sound.
bit of a gun drill for you.
And they used to talk about when they fired them. You hear that?
So lawn ornament.
Going over, folks.
Okay,
We
we
don't
got
bite.
enough folks here. We might as well go.
Sure. Well, go. We just gave them a talk, but
Thank you so much.
you're quite welcome.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You got the amateur bunch.
For the folks that came and knew, and those that are here, you're free to stay as well. Is we're going to talk about artillery. We're not going to, some people say on the talk, well, we're going to do a little talk on artillery. I'm not going to do a little talk on artillery. We're going to do a big talk on artillery. That's like why some of us artillerymen are considered a big bore, but that's another story all in itself. What we're representing is the artillery battery that was in this position in the opening phases of the battle here at Gettysburg. It was the 4th U.S. Battery B. Now, when you look at artillery during the Civil War, you see, well, you had battery this here and battery that there. A battery is like a company in a regiment. So if you're familiar with any of the military formations, especially like an infantry regiment, you would have the 12th Virginia, let's say, company A, B, C, D. Well, here you have the 4th U.S. Artillery, it's regular Army, battery A, B, C, D is what you have. And those batteries were not assigned to just one Army Corps. These artillery regiments were divided up in batteries. So you're going to find the 4th U.S. Artillery, Battery B, with the 1st Army Corps, but yet you go over to where the 2nd Army Corps is. You see where Lieutenant Alonzo Cushing was killed. He was with the 4th U.S. Artillery, a different battery altogether, but the same regiment. Then you had the states that had their own batteries as well to confuse the whole issue that were assigned. So the artillery is a special branch of itself. You don't hear much about artillery, and I had a gentleman earlier today when we were talking to him. He says, well, frankly, I got to be honest with you. The only thing that I know about artillery is they go boom. And I said, you're my kind of person to talk to. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more what makes it go boom, for example. Now, with the northern guns, you had 6 guns in a battery. In the southern batteries, there were 4 guns. However, the principles are the same. To transport the gun, and let's bring it all down to just the single piece itself. To transport this piece, you would hook it up to a wagon called the limber chest. It's a 2-wheel cart that has an ammunition box on it. It was pulled by 6 horses. In a battery, you would have another type of ammunition cart, which was that same limber, but another cart behind it that had 2 more boxes of ammunition. That's for each section of a battery. So, but again, we want to focus on the one gun. This is known as light artillery. And you'll also hear the term of heavy artillery. And that doesn't mean those fellas are bigger than us. That means that they were working artillery in fortifications, the larger guns. The troops that were around Washington and the fortifications were heavy artillery because you have the Rodman guns, the large seacoast guns, things like that. The field artillery is light and mobile. Artillery itself comes into its being as an organized fighting unit, not in America, but by Frederick the Great, the King of Prussia. He takes this weapon that had been around. The Chinese had come up with the concept of gunpowder and projectiles and so forth. In medieval times, there were rudimentary forms of artillery that were firing rocks carved round. But he takes all this and turns it into what would be the modern artillery. They were the best in the world in those days, and we're talking pre-Revolutionary War. And the Revolutionary War tactics with artillery were all based on what the King of Prussia came up with. And he was so proud of his artillery that he referred to it as artillery will add dignity to what otherwise is an uncivilized brawl. You know, typical royal tactics. But as time would go on, there'd be an evolution in artillery, and Americans would take the forefront in the 1840s in Mexico. Artillery was a situation where you rolled the guns up in these positions, you put them here, and you spent the rest of the battle here shooting away. Well, there was a young lieutenant, just graduated from West Point. Last name was Ringgold. He came up with the idea that we pull these guns onto the field with horses. Why do we have to stay static in one position? We can move with the battle. And he does. And he ends up being so successful at it that the Mexican army couldn't figure it out because they concentrate on him here, and next thing you know, he's over here. So he's hooking up. He perfects the movement of artillery. We come to the Civil War, and artillery is at its forefront pinnacle at that time. So, when it comes to the gun itself, there's always guys like this lounging around the gun and that. How many men does it take to operate this gun? For one cannon, the whole enchilada with one cannon, you have 7 men with the gun, and then you can add 2 more to make it 10, who were driving the horses. The cannoneers did not ride horses unless they were mounted artillery. They marched alongside the pulled gun as the infantry did. You have on the gun that we'll represent today 4 immediate men to work on the gun itself. I'll get in their detail in a second. You have 2 types of artillery, field artillery, light artillery that's being used. You have the rifled guns, and as you travel around, you'll see these cannons with a tube. That's what an artilleryman calls the barrel, are black. They're iron. And those are rifled gun. You cannot rifle bronze. They tried it, didn't work. But iron guns are rifled. There's lands and grooves cut into it, just like a small arms. The shell is conical shaped. The idea being you get that shell to spin like a football. You throw a football with a spiral, it's going to go a lot farther than one you throw end over end. That's the principle. Then you have this type. The long range is rifle. Artillery, the short range is smoothbore. This has no lands or groove, it's just a smooth tube. This is made out of bronze. Don't let anybody say to you, look at that brass cannon, because that's a thing of marvel. They don't exist. Brass is too soft of a metal. Bronze is a combination of copper, tin, and another alloy. And bronze is able to expand and contract with pressure. And it'll last a lot longer too. The type of round that this fires is a round ball. And unlike what a rifled gun has, to load that type of cannon, you had to load the gunpowder first and then put the cannonball or the cannon shell on top of it. With the smoothbore, it was all prepackaged. And it would come such as this. This is a facsimile. You have a powder bag in the back. You have 2 pounds of gunpowder here. You have a wooden block called a sabot that the powder bag is tied to. Then you have the round itself, the cannonball. It's 12 pounds. That's where the term 12-pound Napoleon comes from. The tube is called Napoleon. It's held in place by iron strappings. This is loaded as one piece into the bag. You had different types of rounds with this. This represents a solid shot. It's a solid cannonball. Now, a lot of people go, well, a solid cannonball doesn't explode. I mean, what good does it do? This is very devastating. Because against advancing infantry, there's a little technique that artillerymen did called skip shot. How many have ever skipped a stone across a pond or a stream? Yeah. That's what you do with this. I aim the gun low. Where it hits the ground, it skips. It goes into the enemy rank like a bowling ball in duck pins. Bounces all over the place. Many casualties with one shot. The idea is knock down more enemy that's coming at you than they're knocking down at you. You had exploding rounds. You had a case shot, which is a hollow cannonball with a bursting charge in it, and so you had shrapnel pieces from the outside. Then you had a spherical case that had a little bit more punch. It actually had lead balls inside, more debris to hit the enemy with. Those were ignited by a fuse that was in the front, placed in the front. It was a paper fuse, or there's various types, but we'll stick with the paper. And how did that paper get ignited? Well, when this thing ignites, the flame will encompass the round, and that's what lights the fuse. And how did it look? Well, we've all been to 4th of July and seen that round going up. That's the fuse burner. If you fired this gun at night with a fuse round, that's what you'd see before it went off. Same basic principle. A little sidebar here about gunpowder. Gunpowder does not explode. Gunpowder burns, and it burns rapidly. And rapid burning creates pressure. And when it's put in a confined space like the breech, the back end of this gun, it burns rapidly. It's got pressed in the front that builds up that pressure, so the bang you hear is the release of the pressure. The smoke you see is from the burning powder. The flame is the residual of both. So, and it works, and it still works today even with smokeless powder. And it's the same basic principle that was done. To ignite this gun, there was a little primer called the friction primer. It's made out of brass. It contained a fine gunpowder element that had a trigger in the top that was fulminated of mercury, like a match head. There was a wire that came across. When it got pulled, it ignited that fulminated mercury, ignited the gunpowder in that primer. There we go. In the primer, and shot a a stream of flame down into the barrel, into that cartridge that was pierced open. I'll go through all the detail of how that happened in a minute. And the gun would fire. The last round that they had that was probably the most devastating of all was called canister. This was the same configuration, but instead of a cannonball, there was a tin can, it looked like a coffee can, and it was filled with iron balls. That would erupt in the barrel when fired and turn the gun into a large shotgun. The most devastating anti-personnel round you're going to find, because the closer you got to the gun, it could literally vaporize human flesh. During Pickett's charge, double canister was fired into the advancing Confederates, and through the smoke, the soldiers wrote that they could see body parts and equipment in a mist of red throughout the air. So, nasty business. But how does it look? Well, we like to show that to you now. We've got 4 cannoneers. They are the ones that will be at the gun itself. We do not have a fellow who runs the ammunition up to the gun from the 2 fellows on the ammunition chest. So the guy that's running using a leather haversack like by the wheel there, everybody's got a number. He's number 5, then you hit 6 and 7 back here. What we're dealing with here is number 1. The number 1 man's job is to, first of all, on the one end of that ramrod, you can see he's got a cloth wrapped around. It's called a sponge. He moistens that sponge, runs it down the tube. Why is he doing that? Pull it down and put out any sparks that are in there. You don't want any hot embers in there when you put a live round on top, as he's going to go traveling with that round. At the same time, the number 3 man has on his thumb this little leather cover. It's called a thumb stall. The vent, the hole in the back, he puts it over there because when he's sponging that barrel, it works like a bellows, and it keeps air from being sucked in there and fanning any flames. He stays doing that as long as number 1's doing the job. The second part of his job is to use the other end of the ramrod known as the block, and that's what he pushes the round into the barrel with. How's the round get in the barrel? Well, that number 5 guy we don't have will bring it up to this one. He's number 2. His sole job is to place that round in the muzzle, and then he stands out of the way. Number 3, after he's done thumbing that vent with number 1, he then will help me. I'm the only guy that has a title. I'm the gunner. I'm the NCO, the chief of the piece. My job is to sight this weapon. And I have a sight that I would bring out. I would place here. There would be a little porch off the back that it hung off of, and there was a sight on the end of the barrel, long gone. Through this, I would sight, move the elevation screw, I would get my elevation up and down. Once that's done, I need to traverse left and right. That's where he comes in. By the use of this device called a hand trail spike that puts through these loops, he's able to pick up the trail and move it at my direction. So now I can traverse. When that's done, he's not done yet. He has to help number 4. Number 4 is the guy that actually pulls the trigger. And number 4 has that friction primer hooked up to a lanyard. He steps in with number 3. Number 3 takes out a vent wire, shoves it down in the vent to pierce open that powder bag. Number 4 will insert the friction primer into the vent. 3 will steady it in place while 4 gets into position. 4 will nod at number 3, who will step out of the way. That lets the gunner know he's ready to fire, and then my job is to yell, fire. He pulls the lanyard. The gun goes off, we start it all over again. It takes me 10 times longer to tell you how this works versus doing it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through, at a slower pace, an exercise on loading and firing the gun. And then we'll pick it up a bit and get it as best as we can to this day. This is our second time out this year. We haven't been practicing all winter, I'm sorry to say. So it might be a little rusty. No, these guys are good.
I'm not rusty.
So, any questions? All right. The gunner's job also is to call out the distance of a round that needs a fuse. So if I call out a round of case shot 300 yards or 1,300 yards, that's going to equate to about 2 seconds of fuse. They cut the fuse at the limber chest, insert it into the shell, and send that up. So that's how that takes place. So let's use that as an example. 1 round, case shot, 1,300 yards, load. Right. Fire. That's the basic operation to it. And when you go into more of a battle situation speed, what they train for, then we step up the pace on a lot of different things. And you'll notice that at this stage of the game, I took my time with yelling fire. Since we're going to rapid fire until we're ordered to stop. You'll see how close call it comes from number 3 to step out of the way. Now, another reason why after I sight the gun, the gunner will come back to this position is that I'm looking down range. I'm seeing what I can through the smoke where the round's going. We have a battery commander, a lieutenant, a little bit further. He's got a better advantage point. He can let me know if the rounds from his angle are hitting where they should. And by yelling, this is how it's communicated. They tried with the artillery to use bugle calls for that. Didn't work too well. It's still the yell as loud as you can. So one thing you can tell about an artilleryman, he's going to be kind of hoarse. And if you ask him a question, it's like, huh? So because they didn't wear hearing protection. Spherical case, 1,400 yards, load. Rape. Fire. And you would repeat that motion over and over and over again. Artillery itself draws attention on a battlefield because you'll have during such cases as with Pickett's charge, the Confederates are firing an artillery barrage. And the sidebar on that, you'll read throughout history about how artillery is going to be used to soften the enemy position, and we rush in with the everybody to look at history to tell me where and when that actually happened. It's a psychological thing. Pickett's charge did not soften the federal lines. What happened during the Revolutionary War at Guilford Courthouse with the British artillery, they got to the point they were shooting into the backs of their own troops. Didn't help. Normandy. We peppered that beach with coastal artillery from ships, from planes, everything. They were still there. It's psychological more than anything else. There is the physical damage, but you try to do the psychological, get to hammer the position as much as you can. So they're repeatedly going through. The men themselves are a target. Because you take out the artillery, that frees the range a little bit. You just have to deal with small arm fire of the enemy infantry. You don't have the big punch of the artillery. You try to capture it, take it out best way you can. The artillerymen are not armed. The officers are, some of the gunners are, but these men aren't. So if they're on top, they're using hand spikes, ramrods, whatever they do to defend themselves. Of course, the idea is to get the gun out in time. And mostly did. The 4th U.S. that was here, they got out of here at times. Because if you go over to East Cemetery Hill, where General Winfield Scott Hancock's statue is, you'll see these artillery lunettes. That's the 4th U.S. Artillery. That's where they ended up. And they got out of here, but it was at a cost. Life expectancy for number 1 and number 2 in a heated situation with the enemy coming up upon you where you're trying to hook up and shoot at the same time is maybe 10-15 minutes. Every man was cross-trained. Every man could do everybody's job, from the officer sighting to the gunner to the number 1 and number 2 man. They all knew how to do it. I mentioned Alonzo Cushing. He was a lieutenant, commanding a battery. He got the Medal of Honor finally for what he did here at Gettysburg during Pickett's charge. For his battery was hammered during the bombardment. They were the center of the focus of the attack of the Confederates. The artillerymen were dropping left and right. There's a story about the number 3 man of one of the guns. A round came in, exploded, and he was seen hobbling to the rear with his leg dangling, the other leg dangling. He probably bled out behind him. Cushing himself was hit with shrapnel in the lower bowel section that laid him open. He's literally holding his entrails in. He's hit in the shoulder by a piece of shrapnel. He keeps going. He's calling orders. He pulls the last shot of double canister. At the same time he pulled, he was shot in the mouth and instantly killed. That's a hero. And he's buried at West Point, but it took him to about 20 years ago to finally get the paperwork through to give that man his medal of honor. Young guy. The courage is just incredible. So, we'll run one more drill, then you guys can come up, take a good look. Any questions you got, we're glad to answer. And there's 1 round canister load. Right. Fire! I'll leave you with just one thought with artillerymen. Artillerymen always believe there's only 2 types of people on a battlefield. Other artillerymen and everything else is just targets. Come on over. Come on over.
Our questions and compliments.
Hold on.
Thank you.
About 3. Well, muskets you can up at 1. Yeah, it's about 4 rounds.
If you can,
Like battle.
Remember one thing. What these human beings that had drowned. And these guys were so well trained, they were literally automatons. And what the infantry on so much, you're right at that time, going through the motion, yell fire, put a rocket on the way, and literally
Yeah. I'm okay right now.
It's working out going south of the tires are getting on the side.
Yeah. I'm gonna do an outro on the porch.
Oh,
Well, that was pretty cool to see how they worked the cannon back way then. And the example they did an excellent job. He was an excellent speaker, explained it pretty well. So we were at General Lee's headquarters. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, give us a thumbs up, a like, and subscribe our videos. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you later.